Myrmidia, the goddess of war, strategy, and scientific warfare, but also civilization, beauty, and honor. There is some mystery surrounding this god. We might not be able to unravel that mystery, but we can take a look at the boon she grants. Myrmidia's Great Leveler. Like a whirlwind of blades, the character can dive into the enemy with a strong cleave weapon and massively increase the stagger power of his weapon, wreaking havoc amongst enemy lines. From all those titles she bears, we can already see how this ability is linked to her. But let's dive a little deeper. Myrmidia was not always a god. While she is considered to be the daughter of Vermintide and Morr, it is said that she was born to mortal parents, which died early in her life. Given to her uncle and aunt, she was being forced to work dawn till dusk, until one day they sold her off to a local lord, who objected her to more indignities. She got her revenge though, in the form of a ceremonial spear, which she used to kill him. From the source material, it seems like during that altercation she sustained mortal wounds. Her last will was a large ship to be built, so she can sail off into the west. It is theorized that she sailed towards her home among the gods, though as is with divine beings, it is never clear what the truth is. The similarity between Myrmidia and the rise of Sigmar, who also traveled towards the west, never to be seen again, but now a god in his own right, sparks heavy religious controversy within the empire. The Southerners claim that Myrmidia has always been a god and was reincarnated as a mortal to learn of the plight and suffering of mortals, while Sigmar was born a mortal and became a god, though some claim that Sigmar was the son of Ulrich, which the cult of Sigmar tried to quell, but the myth itself proved to be too popular to eradicate from society. Her place of birth is not entirely clear. While the Tyleans claim that she was born in Remas and conquered Estalia, the Estalians claim she was born in Grater and conquered Tylea. Whatever the truth is, she united those two lands and rallied its people against all enemies they were facing. Imperial records imply that she appeared after the founding of the empire, while other sources seem to imply she was already a warrior goddess worshipped in pre-imperial times in Grater, where her temples were protected by one of her orders, the Myrmidons. One of her holy books, the Bellona Myrmidia, claims that she guided the founding father of Tylean civilization, but abandoned him. While gods like Ulrich and Sigmar stand for strength and the fury of battle, Myrmidia herself is more about the artistry and the science behind it, and is a preferred choice of worship for those that are professional soldiers and strategists. Her worship is overshadowed by that of Sigmar and Ulrich, however, and Tylean and Estalian followers are fanatical in their devotion towards her. She is not a product of fantasy or wild stories entirely. Once a vampire count led a bloody assault to claim the so-called Book of Wisdom for himself, a book connected to one of Myrmidia's aspects, that of being the goddess of wisdom. Upon touching it, his vampiric existence was brought to a quick end, as he was turned to dust immediately. Interestingly enough, she has temples located in places such as Nuln or Talabheim, which we covered in the last video as the seat of power of Tal. Overall, there are temples to her in many of the major towns and cities, and in Wissenland, one can find the monastery of the Black Maiden, which was an individual that Myrmidia met and saved during one of her campaigns, which led to the massacre of the Three Gorges, because the Black Maiden warned her about an ambush that was lying ahead, and then wandered off into the mountains to live a reclusive life. One notable thing here, in Myrmidia's cult, 3 knightly orders are actually dedicated to the Black Maiden, sworn to follow her reclusive ways. One of those orders is called the Hermitic Order of Nachmut's Peace, also known as the Leoricans, or Leoricans, however you want to pronounce that. Another one is simply called the Monastery of the Black Maiden, located in Wissenland. One notable event that caused the formation of a very well-known order of Templars, called the Knights of the Blazing Sun, happened during the war between Estalia and Arabi. Imperial forces fought around a temple dedicated to Myrmidia in the town of Grater, and it is said that Myrmidia herself intervened in that battle, causing an earthquake to dislodge a bronze statue, falling on the enemy general, causing the Arabian forces to flee, saving the group of Imperials from a certain loss. When they returned to the empire, they founded the Order of the Blazing Sun and built a shrine to Myrmidia in the heart of Talepheim. Her temples themselves follow the architecture found in places like Talia or Estalia. Domed roofs covering rectangular halls with exteriors often carved with low reliefs showing battle scenes or tableaus of weapons and shields. Her shrines often take the form of miniature temples, statues of her, or freestanding sculptures of stacked weapons, shields, and armor. Within those sites, it is common to find cramped, circular lecturing theaters for lessons in warcraft and strategy, only dwarfed by the seated halls with a lowered central area where the priests lead services to their goddess. Her holy sites are also known for their more or less scandalous depictions of the goddess and her saints, often represented wearing little more than scarves about their waists, which the Puritans of the Sigmarites find vehemently unacceptable. The common folk, on the other hand, don't really care, since most average people within the empire find it important to respect the beliefs of their fellow humans, as long as they don't worship some pagan elf horror or the gods of chaos. She herself is commonly portrayed as a tall, muscular young woman, armed and equipped with archaic southern stylings. The most common holy symbols for her depict a spear behind a shield, shields with eagles or suns, and the sun symbol itself often containing the face of a woman. Her clerics usually wear blue cowls over white robes with red edging. Her symbol either sewn into the left breast or worn as a cloak clasp. But enough about her story or what her and her clerics look like. What does she grant those that follow her? It is said that she grants generals the insight to win any battle with minimal losses, and soldiers the skill to defeat their foes quickly and without suffering major losses or wounds. From what I can read into her aspects, I would assume that she grants warfare engineers and scientists quick bursts of insight into technological advancement, so the armies they serve gain the capability of crushing their foes from range and gain knowledge about metallurgy. In addition to physical warfare, her more devout followers are capable of manifesting specific miracles. To give a few examples: Blazing Sun, a miracle where Myrmidia answers the prayer of the cleric with blinding flame. Dismay Foe, your appearance takes on the wrathful aspect of Myrmidia, frightening your enemies. Quick Strike, this miracle allows the caster to make a quick attack, rather self-explanatory. Skill of Combat, you instill your allies with the skill of Myrmidia. Since she is a battle goddess, that can mean a lot. It could be about knowledge tied to warfare, or how to use a weapon that the target of this miracle never knew how to use. That would actually be an interesting miracle for Chaos Wastes. Your characters now have a chance of getting access to a weapon that the current career would not have been able to use before. Imagine a Grey Knight with a blunderbuss, or the Ranger veteran with a troll hammer torpedo. Well, now to her strictures. 1. Act with honor and dignity in all matters. 2. Respect prisoners of war and never kill an enemy who surrenders. Worshippers of chaos are probably an exception, as we can see with the next stricture. Show no mercy to the unrepentant enemies of humanity. 4. Obey all honorable orders. 5. Preserve the weak from the horrors of war. Under Myrmidia's guidance, only soldiers should witness the horror that is war, and that those that cannot wage war and cannot become soldiers for whatever reason should be protected. In conclusion, a very fitting boon for the goddess of war, especially for the battle wizard with a flame sword. Infinite cleave on the weapon, hitting 5 enemies and then increasing your stagger power by an additional 50%, furthermore increasing the amount of temporary hit points we can get with it. Very fitting indeed, especially when we consider that Sienna's chosen patron god in the Chaos Wastes is Myrmidia herself. Next, Morr's protection. Well, let me start with this. The ability? Really good, especially on a more tanky individual. Foot Knight, Ironbreaker, in general those characters that can stand within an onslaught of enemies and pick someone up, etc. However, big however, I think that this ability does not fit Morr at all, whatsoever. Controversial, I can already tell, but how about we take a look into why I think that, and maybe I can convince you in case you think otherwise. But before we do that, I would like to ask that if you enjoyed this little excursion into the old gods of the Warhammer world, help me out a little with the algorithm and maybe leave me a little comment and / or a like, maybe even a sub if you aren't subscribed. According to my calculations, this little series might become a 25+ part series, and I wouldn't want you to miss out on that lore, even if you just have it running in the background for some noise, or you want some interesting lore for an RPG campaign or for your character in an RPG campaign. Thank you for your patience and excuse this a little intermission of this humble internet bagger. To understand Morr, we need to understand the role of death in the old world. There are many gods in Warhammer covering all kinds of aspects that a mortal will encounter in his life. There is no one-size-fits-all god. As we already talked about them, Esmeralda is considered the god of food and cooking, and Tal has many, and I mean many aspects. Hunting, beasts, nature, force of nature, and so on. Morr, however, covers the mournful aspect of life. That of the pain that a mortal has to embrace when a loved one departs into the afterlife. Death is an everlasting constant in a world where war, disease, and the nightmarish creations of the dark gods roam and maraud unbound through the shadows of forgotten ruins and underneath the treetops of overgrown forests where not even the eyes of Tal dare to gaze. It is so common, in fact, that some say that the people of the Empire have an unhealthy fascination with it, always incorporating and decorating their banners and buildings with the symbols of death, while interestingly enough, his symbol is that of a raven, not that of a skull. Through this veneration of the god of the dead, his eyes gleam into the lively streets of every city within the Empire and on every battlefield where a standard has been brought that is decorated with the martial symbolism of death. However, a distinction has to be made. Morr is the god of the dead, not the god of death. It is rumored that at the beginning of time, or rather at the beginning of the world, Morr, Tal and Ulrich divided the world between them. Tal and Ulrich both demanded the living world and fought for it, but Morr was content with settling for the empty realm of the dead. Ulrich and Tal ignored him, which allowed him to then populate his own empty realm of the dead by intruding upon theirs and killing the inhabitants to fill his own realm. Angered by this, they confronted him, and he agreed to stop under the condition that all the living things within their domain one day when they die end up in his domain. Another, maybe more relatable story is that Morr protected the soul of the first departed human from the hunger of the dark gods, and as more humans died, Morr took them under his protection. Whatever the truth may be, he is real, and his power extends into the old world where the cultists of Morr protect the departed from the threat of necromancy. This is where his aspect as the god of the dead, not the god of death, comes into play. While to the untrained eye the usage of the purple wind of death, Sheyish, of death magic, might seem like necromancy, the followers of Morr adopted his hatred towards the act of raising the dead. In this regard, the vampire counts are a living embodiment of what Morr despises with every ounce of his being. Overall, only the dead can seek his protection, not the living. Such is the way of Morr, and such is the belief of his cultists who, while not uncaring in general, do not care for the living, since they do not matter in the eyes of Morr. Morr takes the principle of rest in peace very serious, since necromancers are those that seek to steal from Morr. Stories are told of priests of Morr wandering across a battlefield, speaking the last rites for the departed, while ignoring those that were still breathing until they were no longer. They are strict in their care and take their burden and responsibility very serious, to the point where they martyr themselves by staying in plague-ridden locations to bury the dead and speak the last rites for them.
only to become one of them. But a priest of Morr does not fear death. To give an example of how strict the priests of Morr are in their belief, most of the followers of Morr believe that even the soul of a necromancer will be protected by Morr once they enter his realm, and a soul forced back into an unliving body, even an intelligent undead that might claim he is happy with his condition, must be laid to rest by whatever means are necessary for that. But when the resting place is reached and the soul entered Morr's realm, even the most sinful, those that stole from him, or even the followers of the ruinous powers, will be protected. Now, Morr is not just the father of Myrmidia, but also the brother to Cain, the elven god of murder. One of the reasons why the servants of Morr believe that every soul should receive the proper rites is because they are afraid that without them, their soul departs to Morr's hateful brother to be tortured by Cain, or even devoured by the gods of chaos, and that souls know this on an instinctive level, which is the reason why, in the eyes of the Morrians, souls of those that have not received the proper rites cling to the world as ghosts, and ghosts are a real and dangerous thing in the Warhammer world. In addition to being the god of death, Morr is also the god of dreams and prophecy. We do have this wonderful potion called the Potion of Prophetic Strike, giving the imbiber clarity and wisdom into future events, empowering their strikes. So here, do be like that, Morr is a fitting candidate. There is more to be said here though. Those that serve Morr, at least in the eyes of the priests of the cult, are coming to him either alive or dead, which is why they do not actively pursue the recruitment of new members. A potential initiate to the cult usually receives prophetic visions in his dreams, or even shocking, vivid nightmares involving the Lord of the Dead. In some rare cases, those visions are received by someone that is already within the cult, and the Lord of the Dead sends signs and portents so that this individual recruits someone very specific. The visions themselves can also be portent of grave danger coming for the living. A warning by Morr. From all the things stated so far, it does not seem like Morr's protection should be a thing. The living are not for whom he cares, as long as they are not his cultists. The only exception would be his prophetic visions, which is something that Saltspire apparently received. To quote one of his monologues while in the pilgrimage chamber, "Why are my dreams full of blood?" Another exception might be political distress, when some members of the cult have ties to the nobility and intervene in the affairs of the living. And now to some trivia. The priests of Morr usually dress in unornamented black and purple robes, often adorned with symbolisms of death, which do not bear any markings regarding their rank within the cult. While seeming very solemn and quiet, hobbies and recreational activities are not just endorsed by the cult, but in actuality are promoted. Interests that train a steady hand, good sewing skills, or produce sawdust are all encouraged. While the colorful and flamboyant usually do not join the cult, a priest of Morr belongs to that very specific group of people that can surprise those that get to know them. After all, if you only ever meet the priests of Morr at funerals, you might not know that they have active friend circles and hobbies that they pursue. After all, they are still normal human beings, despite their solemn and maybe even frightening appearance. And humor is not lost on them. For example, every 10 years the temples of Morr have to meet to discuss rites and matters of doctrine. Usually the member that is supposed to go to that meeting as representative of that temple receives a vision from Morr that he is supposed to go. Sometimes, however, the high priest of a temple receives a vision of an underling that is supposed to go for the meetup. A particularly irritating underling, if you catch my drift. Within the cult of Morr exists one primary division, that between the Order of the Shroud, who revere him as god of the dead, and the Augurs, who revere him as god of dreams and prophecy. While the Order of the Shroud is the bigger one and dominates some of the other orders within the cult, such as the Black Guard, the Order of Doomsayers is aligned with the Augurs. Makes sense, right? Interestingly enough, there is almost no tension between the different orders. The only thing that does create tension are the wandering priests of the orders that usually do not align themselves with the orders and just follow their dreams and wander the world. Those that are more sedentary members of the cult despise them and don't want them to hang around for too long. The wanderers, however, oblige to that, since they do have that itching wanderlust anyway. An interesting tidbit about those wandering priests. They do like to be on the lookout for tombs filled with treasure, but not to loot, but rather to perform the last rites on those that died within those tombs, to then leave the treasure intact and untouched. Overall, however, since they wander around so much, they find themselves much more affiliated with the living than the rest of the members of the cult, and make a good basis for a pen and paper character. The adventurer already writes itself. And now to end this, let's talk about his strictures. There are 7 of them, and they go as follows. 1. Protect the dead. 2. Observe all the rites of funeral and wake. 3. Oppose necromancers and the undead wherever and whenever they are encountered. 4. Be respectful and considerate of the dead and their families. 5. Pay heed to your dreams. 6. Never refuse to conduct a funeral. 7. Never allow the dead to be raised unless given special permission by Morr himself. Now I hope I could convince you that Morr, while being pretty cool, let's be honest here, is not a fitting choice for Morr's protection. After all, he only cares about the dead. But maybe, just maybe, we can look at it through the lens of a priest who wants to protect those around him from dying, just a little more indirect in comparison to gods like Shalia, whose miracles are more healing related. Within Morr's cult is a small miracle present called Preserve Corpse, which hinders a corpse from rotting. If we stretch it by 1.5 miles, we might have a fit, but other than that, I'm not convinced. Well then, that was that for today, and I hope you enjoyed this. I certainly did. Myrmidia is really cool, and Morr might just slip into my top 5. And I say that as someone who really likes the Chaos Gods. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day!